A few days ago, I decided to try and create an all-black RG350 by stealing parts from the transparent black unit. In order to do this, I needed to swap out the start and select buttons, the middle casing, and the two joysticks. I was ultimately successful in making what I believe to be the second best looking RG350 to not officially exist, but in doing so, I ended up creating a less than ideal, transparent, and orange color combination. I made some pretty ugly color combinations before sacrificing my all-black RG350 to create what I believe is the best looking color combination currently possible. The only problem with this was the fact that I now had two ugly devices instead of three good-looking ones. I decided to try and place an order for two sets of black components to recreate my all-black RG350 and my original transparent black unit. The following video is a DIY guide to customizing your RG350. I covered a little bit of this in my last video, so I'm going to skip past some parts, but you're going to start off by disassembling the back plate and the 4 screws, and then you should be able to reach into this corner here and pry it open, allowing you to disconnect the battery cable. One of the big reasons why I don't like this combination is I have a small little gap here, but it does help me pry this open. When you get that open, you're going to reach in and disconnect the battery cable, and then you can set that aside. One of the strangest things about this unit in general is the fact that all 3 of mine have completely different batteries and tape that's around them. It's pretty strange, but you can just set that aside for now. Now we're going to start working on disassembling the outer casing, and you can start off with the top 2 shoulder buttons, and you can set those aside once you take those off. Now, one of the things that I have to warn you about on this unit is the fact that the connections for the speakers and the rumble are very, very small, so you can disconnect these. I haven't done it yet, but I have heard of other people doing it. If you have solder, you can fix this easily, but I just want you to be careful when you're working around the edges of this. Now that we got that out of the way, we can start working on taking off the top plate, and the only thing that you have to worry about here is the audio jack and the bottom right hand corner button. You shouldn't have any other issues with anything else when you're taking off this case. A good way to get this piece off is to kind of just pry up from the corner and get some leverage, but you want to make sure when you're doing this that you're pressing down on the ports because you can break the connection. So I will just say when you're doing this that you should try to take your time. If it's not coming out, you can kind of try to bend it out a little bit so it can pop around the port itself, but you just want to be careful because it is very, very easy to break the USB-C port and the audio jack if you are using too much force. Now that we have the top part off, let's start working on this bottom, and this is actually the easiest thing to remove on the device. You just slide up on one of the corners and then the whole thing itself should come up with no issues. But you are going to want to watch out for those 2 speaker cables in the bottom right and left corners. If you take a look at my unit, you can see that I have white speaker grills, and that's because I'm trying to use my 1.5 board in my white unit. And this unit that I have actually comes with the ability to swap these to black, but these are really, really difficult to remove, so I'm just going to opt for keeping these in here because I'm the only one that's going to see this, and if you're not using a transparent case, you have no idea which speaker grill you're using at all. Now I've already modded these 2 sticks, but I will remove them just so you can see what it looks like when it's done. There are 4 screws on the sticks themselves that you're just going to unscrew that are surrounded by a white circle, so you know exactly where you need to put your screws back, and that's basically the exact same thing for everything here. We're going to remove these just to take out those 2 little start and select buttons on the front plate. To be able to access those 2 buttons, we're going to need to take off these 3 screws on the left and the right side and then disconnect the display cable. And again, you're going to want to watch out for those speaker cables when you get around this screw on the left and the right side. Disconnecting the display cable is super easy. You just lift up on the latch and then the cable should be able to slide right through the middle of your PCB. Now, the last time I did this, I didn't spend too much time looking at the display itself because I didn't think that you could remove it. I thought it was actually glued into place, but for just the sake of due diligence, I'm going to try to remove this to see if it is in fact possible to remove the Ambernick logo on the underside of the glass. Took a little bit of work to get this out, and this is what the unit looks like with the IPS display lifted up. There doesn't seem to be any way that I can see to get this logo to be removed or modded unless you actually take the glass off of the front using a heat gun of some kind, but I don't own one, so I can't test that out. From this point, we're in the home stretch. We're just going to reassemble the device and put on our brand new black shoulder buttons, so that way we have essentially recreated the transparent black unit that you can buy from the store itself. The only challenging part here is these speakers. They have an adhesive on the back side that makes it a little bit challenging to get in here, but you should just be able to put a little bit of pressure and get these back into place with no problem. This next part is going to be sped up because it's essentially the same thing as the teardown. You're going to put in those 3 screws again, and then you're going to put the joysticks back inside their slots and connect those to the ribbon cable. Our next step is to disassemble all of these pieces from the kit. The only thing here that really requires some special attention are the R2 and L2 buttons. You're going to need to do a little bit of work on the other side of these so that way they can sit flush in the device, but I'll cover that when we get there. One of the most interesting things about this when I was putting these back into place was the fact that the volume rocker and the reset button were actually connected, and I guarantee when you do this on your unit, you're going to find that these are broken apart, and I don't think that they were intended to be that way. So I'm just going to keep these connected in my unit because it makes it easier to reassemble this, as you only need to worry about one big piece instead of 2 small ones. The easiest way to get this back in my opinion, is to have it be parallel to the floor so that way the buttons can't fall, and then you're just going to start working around the edges to get it to pop back into place. You want to be careful when you get to the power button because that can easily be popped off. I've had to solder that back into place and it's a little bit of a pain to do. So it's important when you get here to take your time. If you get to the point where something doesn't go directly in, just push the button back into its slot and then everything should click into place with no problem. I just got to quickly fix this with a screwdriver and it should be able to click down. One problem that you'll run into when you're trying to put in these R2 and L2 buttons, there's a little bit of extra plastic on the other side that you're going to need to scrape off so that way it can actually be used inside the slot. So I'm just going to take my screwdriver and just scratch away at this so that way I can use these buttons. Once you've got your switches in place, feel free to connect the battery. This is going to power on the device. You can just worry about that later. Finish screwing all the screws, and then I would encourage you to load up the hardware test to make sure everything functions properly. Now that we've finished recreating the transparent black unit with the small mod of the joysticks, it's time to start modding my original unit. I have the white trim from the white unit around this right now, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to use any of those components or not. Right now I just have the 2 white buttons on the front and the purple buttons as my A, B, X, Y keys. I've been taking a look at the joysticks on these units to see what can be done with them, and I'm thinking that the best option for the right stick would be to try and find somebody with a 3D printer and make an assembly that can kind of act as a plug, screwing into the 4 mount points and then just making the unit flush on that side so that way there's only one joystick. Now that we've got the display cable up, we can just remove these white buttons. I'm unsure of which of the purple buttons I'll end up keeping, but I do know that I want to keep some of them. I'm just going to try to mess around with this until I can get a combination that I think looks decent. We're just going to pop these buttons into place. I'm going to put my purple buttons back in. And then I'm going to start working on the shoulder buttons. Again, I'm going to need to scrape off the R2 and L2 buttons so that way they can fit into the unit. While I'm assembling this, it is worth noting that you can't actually buy the assembly that I'm using right now to build these, but I'm hoping that there's enough interest in doing something like this that the manufacturer will sell these kits. The entire thing is made out of plastic, so it shouldn't be too expensive to be able to buy something like this, and I'm sure if the manufacturer doesn't, then somebody else will end up making the CAD designs for all of these and start selling them as a third-party seller. Modding the front plate is going to require a little bit more work, so I don't think that we'll end up getting to the point where we can change those out whenever we want to, but being able to mod the parts of this device that I was able to mod were enough to satisfy my itch to do something. I only wish that we could possibly get to the point where the Ambernick logo on the front isn't in orange, since it doesn't really match anything except for the black and orange unit. Now that my unit is in all black, I would really wish that that was either gray or black. As for the joysticks, I'm going to try to end up modding one of these to not have a joystick, and then for The second one I'm going to try and mod in a smaller joystick to still have that functionality. I'm going to keep my white and black unit as my stock configuration with no modifications except for the colors that you see on screen now. Anyway, I hope you found this DIY video interesting. If you currently own an RG350, would you be interested in doing something like this? If so, what color combination would you use? I'll catch you next time. Taki out.